The sun was setting over downtown Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the small park where a group of teenagers had gathered. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass mixed with the distant aroma of street food from a nearby vendor. It was a typical Friday afternoon, and for Liam and his younger sister Emma, it was a chance to unwind after a long week at school. They sat on a bench near the skateboarding area, watching their friends laugh and show off tricks on their boards. Ryan, one of the older teens in the group, was attempting a complicated flip trick that kept failing, but no one seemed to mind. Everyone was too busy enjoying themselves. Emma leaned back against the bench, her legs swinging lazily as she sipped from a soda can. "You think Ryan's ever gonna land that thing?" she asked, glancing at Liam with a mischievous grin. Liam shrugged, his eyes still fixed on Ryan. "Probably not today, but hey, at least he's trying." He chuckled softly, brushing a strand of dark hair out of his face. At 16, Liam was used to being the calm one in the group, the guy who stayed level-headed when things got chaotic. His younger sister, on the other hand, was more outspoken, always ready with a quick comment or joke. The peaceful atmosphere of the park was suddenly interrupted by the sound of raised voices coming from the far end of the open space. A few heads turned, curious about what was happening. A man named Kyle, well known in the neighborhood for his aggressive behavior, had just entered the scene. He wasn't alone. Two of his friends flanked him, their postures tense and challenging. Kyle was tall and muscular, with short-cropped hair and an intimidating scowl etched onto his face. His reputation preceded him. He was a martial arts enthusiast who often picked fights to prove how tough he was. At first, it seemed like Kyle was simply walking through the park, but then he stopped abruptly, glaring at someone in the crowd. That someone happened to be Ryan. Kyle pointed a finger at him, his voice loud enough to carry across the park. "Hey you, what are you looking at?" Ryan froze mid-trick, his skateboard clattering to the ground. Confusion flickered across his face. "What?" "I wasn't—" "Don't play dumb with me," Kyle snapped, taking a step closer. His friends smirked, clearly enjoying the spectacle. The rest of the teenagers began to gather around, sensing trouble brewing. Liam felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't know Kyle personally, but he'd heard stories about him. Stories about how he'd beaten people up for no reason, how he thrived on intimidation and fear. Ryan held up his hands defensively. "I swear, man, I wasn't looking at you, I was just skating." Kyle ignored him, his jaw clenched tightly. "You think you're better than me? Is that it?" Without waiting for an answer, he lunged forward and grabbed Ryan by the arm. There was a collective gasp from the crowd as Kyle twisted Ryan's arm violently, the sharp crack of bone echoing through the park. Ryan cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground as tears streamed down his face. His arm hung limply at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. "No," Emma shouted, her voice breaking through the stunned silence. She started to get up, but Liam pulled her back down, his grip firm. "Stay here," he whispered urgently. "It's not safe." The crowd murmured nervously, some people stepping back while others pulled out their phones to record the incident. No one dared to intervene, not even the park security guard who stood frozen a few feet away, his face pale. Kyle released Ryan and took a step back, sneering at the fallen teenager. "That's what happens when you mess with me," he said loudly, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Anyone else want to try something?" Liam clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. He wanted to do something, to stand up for Ryan, but he knew he couldn't take on someone like Kyle, not alone, and not without getting hurt himself. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness that washed over him as he watched Kyle strut around like he owned the place. Just as Kyle turned to leave, a calm voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Everyone turned to see a man stepping out of the crowd. He was middle-aged, with graying hair and a weathered face that suggested years of experience. Dressed casually in jeans and a plain t-shirt, he looked unassuming at first glance. But there was something about the way he carried himself, his posture relaxed yet alert, that commanded attention. Several people in the crowd whispered among themselves, recognizing him immediately. "Is that Chuck Norris? Someone muttered in disbelief. Kyle frowned, narrowing his eyes at the newcomer. Who the hell are you supposed to be? The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked calmly toward Kyle, his movements steady and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. My name is Chuck. And I think you've done enough damage here today. Kyle let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. You serious? You think you can tell me what to do? He cracked his knuckles, sizing Chuck up. Go ahead, old man. Try something. See what happens. Chuck didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Kyle with a piercing gaze. Why are you doing this? He asked, his tone almost gentle. Are you afraid? Or are you just angry? Kyle's expression darkened. Shut up, he barked, throwing a punch aimed directly at Chuck's face. The movement was fast, fueled by rage, but Chuck reacted even faster. With effortless precision, he blocked the punch, redirecting Kyle's momentum. Before anyone could process what was happening, Chuck delivered a single, powerful roundhouse kick that sent Kyle sprawling onto the pavement. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and shouting in amazement. Kyle lay there, dazed and humiliated, as Chuck straightened up and adjusted his shirt. Without another word, he turned his attention to Ryan, crouching beside him and asking if he needed help. Paramedics arrived moments later, tending to Ryan's injury as Kyle scrambled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment. As the chaos began to settle, Liam found himself staring at Chuck, unable to look away. There was something extraordinary about the man, not just his fighting skills, but the quiet confidence he exuded. For the first time in his life, Liam felt inspired to be stronger, braver, and more willing to stand up for what was right. And as Chuck quietly disappeared, back into the crowd, leaving behind only whispers of awe, Liam knew that this moment would stay with him forever. The days following the incident in the park passed quickly, but the memory of what happened lingered like a shadow over everyone involved. Videos of Chuck Norris taking down Kyle spread across social media within hours. People couldn't stop talking about it, how an unassuming man had stepped out of the crowd and handled the situation with such calm authority. For some, it was inspiring. For others, it was almost surreal. The phrase "Chuck Norris saves the day" became a trending topic online, accompanied by memes and jokes that highlighted his legendary status. Liam found himself replaying the moment over and over in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Chuck deflecting Kyle's punch with ease or the way he delivered that single, devastating kick. It wasn't just the physical act that impressed him. It was the confidence, the control, and the sense of purpose behind it all. Liam had always thought of himself as someone who tried to do the right thing, but now he realized how little action he'd actually taken when it mattered most. When Ryan was attacked, he'd frozen, too scared to intervene. That feeling of helplessness haunted him. At school, conversations buzzed about the fight in the park. Some students joked about how Kyle got Norris'd, while others speculated about whether Chuck Norris really lived up to his larger-than-life reputation. Emma, ever the outspoken one, chimed in during lunch with her own take. I mean, come on, it's Chuck Norris, of course he's real. And obviously he's unstoppable. Liam picked at his sandwich, not saying much. His thoughts were elsewhere. He kept wondering if he could have done more to protect Ryan, or if he would ever be brave enough to stand up to someone like Kyle. Emma noticed her brother's silence and nudged him playfully. You okay? You've been acting weird since Friday. I'm fine, Liam said, forcing a smile. But deep down he knew he wasn't. Something inside him had shifted after witnessing Chuck's actions. He felt inspired, yes, but also restless, like there was something he needed to do, even though he didn't know exactly what it was yet. Meanwhile, Kyle retreated from public view, nursing both his injuries and his wounded pride. His friends avoided him, sensing that his anger made him unpredictable. They hadn't expected him to lose so easily or so publicly, and they weren't eager to stick around for whatever might happen next. Alone in his apartment, Kyle replayed the fight in his head, obsessing over every detail. He couldn't understand how he'd been beaten so effortlessly. How could some random guy, a middle-aged man no less, take him down without breaking. A sweat? Kyle's frustration grew into something darker, a burning desire for revenge. He spent hours watching videos of martial arts techniques, practicing moves in front of a mirror, and imagining different scenarios where he confronted Chuck again. This time, he told himself, things would be different. Next time, he wouldn't underestimate his opponent. Next time, he'd make sure Chuck paid for humiliating him. While Kyle plotted his comeback, Liam decided to take matters into his own hands. After another sleepless night filled with thoughts of Ryan's broken arm and Kyle's smug grin, Liam came to a decision. If he wanted to feel prepared, if he wanted to make sure he never felt powerless again, he needed to learn how to defend himself. The idea seemed daunting at first, but the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Learning self-defense wasn't just about protecting himself, it was about being ready to protect others too. On Saturday morning, Liam biked to a nearby strip mall where a small martial arts dojo was tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore. The sign outside read Alvarez Martial Arts Academy. Through the glass door, Liam could see students practicing kicks and punches under the watchful eye of their instructor. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The dojo smelled faintly of polished wood and sweat. A few pairs of eyes glanced his way, but most of the students were focused on their training. At the front of the room stood a man in his late 40s with short graying hair and a kind smile. He wore a traditional white gi and moved with the grace of someone who had spent decades mastering his craft. This was Mr. Alvarez, the owner and head instructor of the academy. "Can I help you?" Mr. Alvarez asked, approaching Liam with a friendly expression. Liam hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Hi, my name's Liam. I was wondering if I could join your classes. I want to learn self-defense." Mr. Alvarez studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's a good reason to start. Self-defense is about more than just fighting. It's about discipline, respect, and knowing when to use your skills wisely. Are you ready to commit to that?" Liam nodded firmly. "Yes, sir." Over the next few weeks, Liam threw himself into his training. Each session began with warm-ups and stretches, followed by drills designed to build strength and agility. Mr. Alvarez emphasized the importance of focus and patience, reminding his students that progress took time. For Liam, the lessons went beyond physical technique. He learned to stay calm under pressure, to think before reacting, and to trust his instincts. Emma noticed the change in her brother almost immediately. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, she turned to him with a teasing grin. "You're turning into a karate kid, aren't you?" Liam laughed, shaking his head. "Not quite, but I'm learning a lot. It's harder than it looks." "Well, you seem different," Emma said, her tone softer now. More confident. "I like it." As Liam continued his training, rumors began circulating about Kyle's plans for revenge. Someone in the neighborhood claimed to have seen him working out at a local gym, muttering about finding Chuck Norris and settling the score once and for all. Liam heard these whispers at school and relayed them to Mr. Alvarez during one of their sessions. "Kyle wants to fight Chuck again," Liam explained, his voice tinged with concern. "Do you think he's serious?" Mr. Alvarez sighed, leaning against the edge of the mat. "People like Kyle are driven by anger and pride. They don't think clearly because they're too focused on proving themselves. But remember this: true strength isn't about winning fights. It's about using your abilities to help others and make the world better." Liam nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the lesson. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Kyle wouldn't give up until he got what he wanted. Determined to find answers, Liam decided to track down Chuck Norris himself. He figured that if anyone could offer advice or insight, it would be the man who had inspired him to take action in the first place. After asking around town and searching online, Liam finally discovered that Chuck often volunteered at a community center a few miles away. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Liam rode his bike to the address he'd found, his heart pounding with anticipation. The community center was bustling with activity. Kids played basketball in the gymnasium, while adults gathered in classrooms for workshops and discussions. Liam spotted Chuck almost immediately. He was standing near a table covered with flyers and brochures, chatting with a group of children who were clearly fascinated by him. Summoning his courage, Liam approached him cautiously. "Excuse me, Mr. Norris?" Chuck turned to face him, his expression warm and welcoming. "Yes? Can I help you?" "My name's Liam," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I just wanted to say thank you for what you did at the park. Watching you stand up to Kyle made me realize how important it is to take action when someone needs help. I've started learning self-defense because of you." Chuck listened intently, nodding slowly. When Liam finished speaking, he placed a hand on the teenager's shoulder. "You're welcome, Liam. Remember this. Being strong isn't just about physical power. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. Keep training, keep learning, and never forget why you started." Liam left the community center feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off his chest. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. Little did he know, however, that Kyle's quest for revenge was far from over, and that their paths would cross again sooner than expected. The days that followed Kyle's defeat at the community center were quieter than anyone expected. For Liam, life felt different, not just because of what had happened, but because of how it had changed him. He walked taller now, his shoulders squared with confidence. The lessons he'd learned from Mr. Alvarez and Chuck Norris stayed with him, guiding his thoughts and actions. Every time he stepped into the dojo, he remembered the importance of discipline and respect. It wasn't just about learning how to fight. It was about becoming a better person. Emma noticed the change in her brother too. She teased him less about being a karate kid, and instead started asking questions about his training. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, she turned to him with genuine curiosity. "So, do you think you could take on someone like Kyle again? Like, for real?" Liam chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't know, I hope I never have to. Fighting isn't the goal, it's kind of the last resort." Emma raised an eyebrow. "But you did pretty good last time. You didn't even look scared." "I was scared," Liam admitted, leaning back against the couch. "I just tried to focus on what I'd learned. And honestly, I think Kyle was more upset with himself than with me. Losing doesn't feel good, especially when everyone's watching." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think he'll try something again?" Liam shrugged. "Maybe. But I think what happened at the community center might have made him think twice. At least I hope so." Meanwhile, Kyle struggled to process everything that had happened. After being defeated by Liam, a teenager half his size, he couldn't shake the feeling of failure. For years, he'd prided himself on his strength and skill, using them to intimidate others and prove his dominance. But now, after 2 humiliating losses, he realized how hollow those victories had been. They hadn't brought him happiness or respect. They'd only isolated him further. Kyle spent most of his time alone, avoiding friends and family who didn't understand why he was so fixated on revenge. He replayed the events at the community center over and over in his mind, analyzing every move Liam had made. At first, his anger burned hotter than ever, but as the days passed, something shifted. He began to notice patterns in his behavior, how quick he was to lash out, how often he let his emotions dictate his actions. One night, while lying awake in bed, Kyle found himself thinking about Chuck Norris's words. "Anger doesn't have to define you." For the first time, those words didn't sound like a lecture, they sounded like a lifeline. Maybe there was another way to live, one where he didn't constantly feel the need to prove himself through violence. The idea scared him, but it also intrigued him. The next morning, Kyle decided to visit the community center again. This time, he didn't go looking for a fight. Instead, he approached one of the volunteers and asked if there were any programs available for people like him, people who wanted to turn their lives around. To his surprise, the volunteer smiled warmly and handed him a flyer for a mentorship program aimed at helping troubled youth and adults find healthier ways to channel their energy. "You should talk to Mr. Norris," the volunteer suggested. He's been running this program for years. He knows what you're going through. Kyle hesitated, unsure if he was ready to face Chuck again. But deep down, he knew this was the first step toward making things right. Slowly, he nodded. Okay, I'll do it. At the dojo, Liam continued to train under Mr. Alvarez's guidance. His progress was steady, and he took pride in mastering new techniques. Each session pushed him to improve not just physically but mentally as well. Mr. Alvarez often reminded his students that martial arts were about balance between strength and restraint, aggression and compassion. One afternoon, as Liam practiced, sparring with another student, Mr. Alvarez called him aside. "You've come a long way," he said, his tone warm but serious. "But there's something I want to ask you. Do you remember why you started training?" Liam thought for a moment before answering. "Because I wanted to protect people. Because I didn't want to feel helpless anymore." Mr. Alvarez nodded approvingly. "And that's still your goal, right? To use what you've learned to help others?" "Yes, sir," Liam replied without hesitation. "Good," Mr. Alvarez said. "Never lose sight of that, because the world needs more people like you, people who are willing to stand up for what's right." Liam left the dojo that day feeling inspired. He knew he still had a lot to learn, but he also knew he was on the right path. As he rode his bike home, he thought about Kyle and wondered if the man would ever find peace. Part of him hoped Kyle would succeed in turning his life around, not just for his own sake, but for the sake of the community. Back at the community center, Kyle met with Chuck Norris for the first time since their encounter. The meeting was awkward, at first with Kyle struggling to find the right words. Finally, he blurted out, "I'm sorry. For everything. For being angry all the time. For picking fights. For ruining other people's lives. I don't want to be that guy anymore." Chuck listened patiently, his expression calm and understanding. When Kyle finished speaking, Chuck placed a hand on his shoulder. "Apologizing is a big step, Kyle, but actions matter more than words. Are you ready to work hard and make a change?" Kyle nodded earnestly. "Yes, sir. I'll do whatever it takes." Chuck smiled. "Then let's get started." Over the next few weeks, Kyle joined the mentorship program, attending workshops and counseling sessions designed to help him manage his anger and rebuild his relationships. He also began volunteering at the community center, assisting with self-defense classes and other activities. It wasn't easy. There were moments when his old habits threatened to resurface, but he kept pushing forward, determined to prove that he could change. Liam heard about Kyle's efforts through the grapevine and felt a sense of cautious optimism. He didn't trust Kyle completely, not yet, but he respected the fact that the man was trying. One Saturday afternoon, while volunteering at the community center himself, Liam crossed paths with Kyle during a workshop. They exchanged polite nods, neither saying much but both acknowledging the unspoken truce between them. As Liam watched Kyle interact with the kids participating in the program, he realized something important. Redemption was possible, even for someone like Kyle. It required effort, humility, and a willingness to confront one's flaws, but it was within reach. And maybe, just maybe, the world would be a little brighter because of it. That evening, as Liam pedaled home on his bike, he reflected on everything that had happened. From the chaos at the park to the showdown at the community center, each moment had taught him valuable lessons about courage, responsibility, and second chances. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt ready to face it, with strength, determination, and an open heart. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt truly hopeful. The days stretched into weeks, and life in the neighborhood began to settle back into its usual rhythm. The incident at the park was still fresh in everyone's minds, but people talked about it less often now. For Liam, though, the memory remained vivid. Every time he stepped into Mr. Alvarez's dojo, he thought about Chuck Norris and the calm authority he had displayed that day. It wasn't just the fight itself. It was the way Chuck had handled everything with grace and purpose. That moment had sparked something inside Liam, a determination to grow stronger not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. At the dojo, Liam threw himself into his training with renewed focus. Each session started with warm-ups, stretching, push-ups, and basic footwork drills, but Liam knew these exercises were more than just preparation for sparring. They taught him patience, discipline, and the importance of building a strong foundation. Mr. Alvarez often reminded his students that martial arts weren't about aggression. They were about control, respect, and using strength responsibly. "You're doing well," Mr. Alvarez said one afternoon after Liam successfully executed a series of kicks and blocks. "But remember, the real challenge isn't mastering techniques. It's learning when not to use them." Liam nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "I get it, sir. It's not about winning fights, it's about knowing when to walk away." "Exactly," Mr. Alvarez replied with a proud smile. "And sometimes walking away takes more courage than standing your ground." These lessons stuck with Liam, shaping the way he thought about conflict and responsibility. At home, Emma noticed how her brother's confidence had grown. He no longer seemed weighed down by the guilt of not stepping in to help Ryan. Instead, he carried himself with a quiet assurance that made her proud. She teased him occasionally, calling him Karate Kid, but she could see how much the training meant to him. Meanwhile, Kyle continued to seethe in private. His bruised ego refused to let go of what had happened at the park. Every time he saw a video of Chuck Norris taking him down, he felt a surge of anger and shame. He spent hours practicing alone in his apartment, punching a worn-out punching bag until his knuckles bled. In his mind, he replayed the fight over and over, imagining different outcomes where he emerged victorious. Kyle's obsession with revenge consumed him. He stopped going out with his friends, stopped answering calls from anyone who tried to reach out. All he cared about was finding Chuck Norris again and proving that their first encounter had been a fluke. He convinced himself that if he trained harder, pushed himself further, he'd be unstoppable. And this time, he wouldn't hold back. Evening, while scrolling through social media, Kyle stumbled upon a post about a community event happening at a local center. The description mentioned free self-defense classes led by none other than Chuck Norris. Kyle's eyes narrowed as he read the details. This was his chance. If Chuck thought he could waltz into town, show off his skills, and humiliate people without consequences, he was wrong. Kyle would make sure of it. By the time Saturday rolled around, Kyle was ready. He dressed in black athletic gear, strapped on his gloves, and headed to the community center. His heart pounded with anticipation as he approached the building, his mind racing with plans for how he'd confront Chuck. He didn't care about anything else, not the crowd gathered outside, not the cheerful chatter coming from inside. All he cared about was settling the score. Inside the community center, things were lively. Families milled about, children laughed and played, and volunteers handed out flyers promoting upcoming workshops. Chuck Norris stood near the entrance, chatting casually with attendees. He looked relaxed, almost as if he didn't have a care in the world. To Kyle, this only added fuel to his rage. How dare Chuck act so nonchalant after humiliating him? Liam arrived at the community center later that afternoon, having decided to attend the event to thank Chuck once more for inspiring him. He hadn't expected such a large turnout. People of all ages filled the space, eager to learn from someone they admired. As Liam scanned the room, he spotted Chuck surrounded by a group of kids who were peppering him with questions. Chuck answered patiently, smiling warmly as he explained the basics of self-defense. Before Liam could approach him, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A commotion erupted near the entrance as Kyle stormed in, his face red with fury. He shoved past a few startled attendees, his gaze locked onto Chuck. "You!" Kyle shouted, pointing an accusatory finger. "You think you can embarrass me and get away with it?" The room fell silent. Everyone turned to watch as Kyle marched toward Chuck, his fists clenched. Some people gasped, others backed away nervously. Liam froze, unsure of what to do. He hadn't anticipated Kyle showing up here, or confronting Chuck in such a public setting. Chuck didn't react immediately. He simply stood there, his expression calm and unreadable. When Kyle reached him, he jabbed a finger into Chuck's chest. "I'm not scared of you, old man. You want to fight? Let's go." For a moment, no one moved. Then Chuck spoke, his voice low and steady. Is this really what you want? To keep feeding your anger instead of addressing why you feel this way? Kyle sneered. Don't try to psychoanalyze me. I'm here to finish what we started. Chuck shook his head slightly. Violence doesn't solve anything, but if you're determined to prove yourself. He paused, glancing around the room before settling his gaze on Liam. Why don't you spar with someone closer to your age? Someone who represents everything you lack. Discipline, humility, and purpose. All eyes turned to Liam, who blinked in surprise. Me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chuck nodded. If you're willing. Liam hesitated, his heart racing. He wasn't sure he was ready to face Kyle, especially not in front of so many people. But then he remembered all the hours he'd spent training, all the lessons Mr. Alvarez had taught him. This wasn't just about defending himself, it was about standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. I'll do it, Liam said finally, stepping forward. Kyle smirked, cracking his neck. Fine, let's see what you've got, kid. The crowd formed a circle around them as Liam and Kyle faced off. Tension crackled in the air, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Kyle lunged forward, throwing a punch aimed at Liam's face. Liam sidestepped quickly, remembering the drills he'd practiced countless times. He countered with a swift kick, catching Kyle off guard. The fight continued, each exchange testing Liam's resolve. Kyle was bigger and stronger, but Liam relied on speed and precision, dodging attacks and striking strategically. Slowly but surely, he gained the upper hand. With one final move, a perfectly timed sweep, Liam knocked Kyle off balance, sending him crashing to the floor. The room erupted into applause, but Liam barely heard it. He extended a hand to Kyle, offering to help him up. For a moment, Kyle stared at it, his chest heaving with exertion. Then, to everyone's surprise, he accepted the gesture and allowed Liam to pull him to his feet. Defeated and humiliated, Kyle stood there, his shoulders slumped. Something in his expression softened as if a weight had been lifted. Chuck stepped forward, his tone gentle but firm. It's not too late to change, Kyle. Anger doesn't have to define you. Use this moment to start fresh. Kyle didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around at the crowd, at the faces watching him with a mix of curiosity and hope. For the first time in years, he felt exposed, not because he'd lost, but because he realized how empty his anger had made him. Maybe, just maybe, there was another path forward. As the event wound down, Liam lingered near Chuck, thanking him once more for giving him the opportunity to step up. Chuck smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did good today, Liam. Remember, true strength comes from within. Liam nodded, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them, one step at a time. Months passed and life in the neighborhood continued to evolve. The park where everything had started became a symbol of change, a place where people gathered not just to relax but to connect, share stories, and support one another. For Liam, it was a reminder of how far he'd come since that fateful afternoon when Kyle broke Ryan's arm. The memory still lingered, but instead of guilt or regret, it now inspired him to keep moving forward. Liam had grown into his role as a protector, not just for himself but for others around him. He spent more time volunteering at the community center, helping with programs aimed at teaching kids self-defense and conflict resolution. Mr. Alvarez often praised him for his dedication, calling him a natural leader. You've got a gift, Alvarez told him one day after class. Use it wisely. Emma noticed the difference too. Her brother wasn't just stronger physically. He radiated confidence and kindness. She teased him less about being a karate kid and instead bragged to her friends about how cool he was. My brother could totally take you down if he wanted to, she joked once during lunch at school. Then she added more seriously, but he wouldn't, because he's better than that. While Liam thrived in his new role, Kyle worked tirelessly to rebuild his life. The mentorship program at the community center gave him structure and purpose, something he'd never truly experienced before. He attended anger management classes, participated in group discussions, and even began journaling to process his emotions. At first, it felt strange, almost uncomfortable to talk openly about his struggles, but over time, he realized how freeing it was. One evening, while volunteering at the center, Kyle approached Chuck Norris. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "For giving me another chance." Chuck smiled warmly. "It's not me you should thank, Kyle. It's yourself. You're the one doing the hard work." Kyle nodded, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't known in years. "I'm trying," he said quietly, "and I won't stop. Not until I make things right, for myself and for everyone else." The turning point came during a community event held at the park. Organized by volunteers from the center, it brought together families, friends, and neighbors for a day of fun and reflection. There were games, food stalls, and performances by local artists. But what made the event special was its theme: unity through strength. It was a celebration of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Liam played a key role in organizing the event. Alongside other volunteers, he helped set up booths, coordinated activities, and ensured everything ran smoothly. As the sun rose high in the sky, the park buzzed with excitement. Kids laughed as they played tug-of-war, parents cheered during sack races, and musicians strummed guitars under shady trees. During a break between activities, Liam found himself standing near Kyle, who was busy handing out flyers for upcoming workshops. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kyle turned to Liam and said, "You know, I used to think strength was all about winning fights. Now I realize it's about making peace, with yourself and with others." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "That's what martial arts taught me, too. It's not about hurting people, it's about protecting them, including yourself." Kyle chuckled softly. "Guess we both learned something, huh?" "Yeah," Liam replied with a grin. "We did." As the day went on, the atmosphere grew warmer and more celebratory. Toward the end of the event, Chuck Norris took the stage to deliver a short speech. The crowd listened intently as he spoke about the importance of community, compassion, and using one's abilities to uplift others. "Strength isn't measured by how many fights you win," he said, his voice calm yet powerful. "It's measured by how many lives you touch and how much good you bring into the world." When he finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause. Liam watched from the sidelines, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This was what it meant to be strong, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. And he knew, without a doubt, that he wanted to dedicate his life to helping others find that same strength. In the weeks that followed, Kyle continued to grow. He started coaching younger students at the community center, sharing his knowledge of martial arts while emphasizing discipline and respect. Watching him interact with the kids, Liam couldn't help but feel proud. Kyle wasn't perfect. He still had moments of frustration and doubt, but he was trying, and sometimes trying was enough. One Saturday afternoon, as Liam and Kyle sparred lightly during practice, Kyle paused mid-session and looked at Liam. "You know, I owe you an apology. For everything. For what happened at the park. For being such a jerk. For all of it." Liam shook his head. "You don't need to apologize to me. Just keep doing what you're doing. That's all the apology anyone needs." Kyle smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and nodded. "Thanks, man, really." As they resumed their practice, Liam reflected on how far they'd both come. They weren't enemies anymore, they were allies, united by a shared goal of making their community stronger and safer. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. The story didn't end there. Life rarely wrapped itself up neatly like a movie or a book. There would always be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, setbacks, and tough decisions. But Liam knew he was ready to face them. With each passing day, he grew more confident in his ability to handle whatever came his way. On a quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Liam sat on a bench at the park. Emma joined him, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. Thinking. Deep thoughts, she asked, handing him one of the cups. Something like that, Liam replied, taking a sip. Just thinking about how much has changed. Emma glanced around at the peaceful scene. The empty skateboarding ramps, the rustling leaves, the distant laughter of children playing nearby. Yeah, it's different now. Better, I think. Liam nodded. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. In that moment, Liam felt a profound sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he trusted that he and those around him would continue to grow, learn, and thrive. And somewhere in the background, Chuck Norris walked away from the park, disappearing into the sunset. His mission here was complete, but his legacy remained, a reminder that true strength comes not from overpowering others but from lifting them up.